This is the mini lesson on properties of matter. By the end of this video, you should be able to define chemical property and physical property. You should also be able to identify examples of each. So I want you to practice your observation skills and tell me, how is the cheese different in this picture compared to that picture? I want you to record your observations on your notes page. So go ahead, pause the video, and record your observations. Okay, so some examples of you could observe the difference between the two cheeses. This one was flowing, more like a liquid, whereas this one was more fixed, like a solid. This one was a yellow color, whereas this one had a black color. You can see it starting to form here. Any other differences, you can ask me if those are valid. So properties of matter. A property is a quality or trait. Every substance will have a unique set of properties that will make it distinct from other substances. So in chemistry, there are two kinds of properties that we talk about. First, physical properties, and then second, chemical properties. So a physical property is a characteristic that can be observed without changing the substance. So it'll stay the same substance when you observe these characteristics. So for example, this apple, if I were to cut it in half, I haven't changed what the substance is. It's still an apple. I've just changed the shape of it. With this cheese, whenever I pour it, I'm changing the shape of it. It's going from the shape of the container it was in to taking the shape of the chips it's on, but it's still the same cheese. Chemical properties, though, are the ability of a substance to change into another substance when you observe them. So the key for this one is it's going to be a different substance whenever it's done. So some key words would be combust, react, combined. And for example, the apple example, whenever you leave an apple core out, it reacts with the air around it and forms a different layer on top. So it turns into a different substance. You would not eat the apple that turned all brown out in the air because it's not the same substance anymore. So that would be a chemical property of the apple. This cheese, whenever you heat it, it's combusting and it's forming this like burnt black stuff on it. So it's no longer the cheese, it's become a different substance that you don't want to eat. So there's also, you can divide the properties into extensive properties. These are properties that depend on the amount of matter that's in the sample you're observing. So for example, mass and volume would be extensive properties. If you look at this picture of a jug of milk being poured into a glass, the milk, the property of its mass and volume for the picture versus the glass is different. So mass and volume would be an extensive property. Intensive properties is a property of matter that depends only on the type of matter in a sample and not the amount. So for example, the temperature at which a phase change takes place does not matter how much of the substance you have. And density, whenever you divide mass by volume, you now have an intensive property that is specific to that substance. So it doesn't matter how much you have, it will always have the same density. Here, I want you to classify each of these as a physical or chemical property. And then I want you to put an E next to it if it's an extensive property and an I next to it if it's an intensive property. So pause the video and go ahead and sort these into either physical property, chemical property, or unsure. All right, so let's practice what you've learned. So pause after each question to see how well you understand the content. A copper penny looks reddish brown and shiny. Is this a physical or chemical property? Pause the video. This is a physical property. You can observe this property without changing the penny into a different substance. Copper is malleable. This means it's easy to bend and make wires from. Is this a physical or chemical property? Pause the video. This is a physical property because you can change the shape of the copper, bend it, and make wires from it, but you don't change it into a different substance. It's still copper. Copper forms new substances when you add nitric acid or sulfuric acid. Is this a physical or chemical property? Pause the video. This is a chemical property because it's forming a new substance in order to observe this property. Copper has a density of 8.92 grams per cubic centimeter. Is this a physical or chemical property? Pause the video. This is a physical property because we can observe this property without changing the copper into a different substance. And this is also the intensive property where it doesn't matter how much substance we have because it's density. The melting point of copper is 1085 degrees Celsius. Is this a physical or chemical property? Pause the video. This is a physical property because the copper is still copper, it's just changed its phase from a solid to a liquid. This is also an intensive property because it doesn't matter how much copper we have, it will always melt at 1085 degrees Celsius. Copper forms a deep blue substance when in contact with ammonia. Physical or chemical property? Pause the video. This is a chemical property. It's forming a deep blue substance, which is a different substance, so we had to change it into something else to observe this. Heat and electricity passes through copper. Physical or chemical property? Pause the video. This is a physical property. When the heat and electricity pass through copper, you're not changing it to a new substance. It is still copper. All right, guys, glue the notes in your page. If you want me to check your sort, let me know.